So this is one of those podcasts where I have so many things I want to cover. Honestly, I spent 15 minutes before hitting the record button just trying to figure out where I wanted to start. One of the issues is I'm trying to bring some video to the podcast. And there's a couple of reasons for it. The main reason is that, we talk a lot about, of course, money, numbers, investing. While I'm recording a show, I'll sometimes jump on Morningstar on the computer and do gather some information, or I'll open up a spreadsheet and talk about some numbers. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I could show you what I'm doing, and even maybe give you some insight into, I guess I'll call it a recording studio. Although as I look around, I'm not quite sure it qualifies as a studio. I don't know. You might like some insight into kind of what goes on behind the microphone, and so. I've got a laptop going on right now, my desktop, another monitor. I'm recording everything on my screen. I'm recording me, I'm sorry to say. And it won't be ready when I publish the podcast because I'm recording this today, Sunday, November 8th, and we'll be publishing the podcast today. The video, though, will get shipped off to a good friend I'm working with who's trying to help me edit all of this into a video that I can put on the blog, I can put on YouTube. And hopefully, the real main purpose of that is to be able to show you what I'm actually doing. If I go to Morningstar, if I go to Personal Capital, if I go to a spreadsheet or whatever, you can see it. And so that's the goal. So anyway, I've got all of these programs running. My computer's probably going to crash in the middle of this podcast. Hopefully not. So I got that going on. And a ton of things I want to cover. And I want to begin actually with an email that I received from a listener named Lee, and she wrote in and had a great question, and I don't know the answer to it, and I could have researched it and come up with an answer for her. I didn't, but I want to share the question with you and then talk about how I'm going to deal with this kind of question. One of the ways. Her question had to do with investing euros. She went to Europe. She came back with 9,000 euros. And didn't exchange it back to U.S. dollars, and doesn't want to. She looks at the exchange rate like we all do. She knows it's not very good right now if you're coming back into U.S. dollars, and she may be taking a trip to Europe in a couple of years. So anyway, her question was, how can I invest this money now? I don't want to convert it to U.S. dollars. I want to invest it as euros. How do I do that? The short answer for me is I have no earthly idea. I've never done that before. All of my investments have been in U.S. dollars. Certainly I own and have owned mutual funds or ETFs that may have exposure to currency. Frankly, it's hard to find an investment today that doesn't have an exposure to currency. Every business that does business outside of the U.S. has exposure to currency, right? My investment in Apple has significant exposure to other currencies. But I've never invested with other currencies. It's always been U.S. dollars. And so I don't know the answer to her question, but here's the thing. I'm guessing some of you do. I checked my stats the other day, and it varies depending on the podcast, but there are right now between 5,000 and 10,000 people that listen to each podcast. And as the podcast has been published for a longer period of time, that number tends to go up over time as people find out about the podcast. I can't tell you how many emails I receive from folks that say, I found out about your podcast a month ago. I've binge listened to them all. I'm caught up to, one person just emailed me the other day. I said, I caught up, I think I'm at 194. Is that the most recent one? I hope not. I want to keep listening to more podcasts. Well, that was the last one until this one. This was 195. But the point is, there's probably plenty of you that have dealt with this issue before and have invested with other currencies. Wouldn't it be great if we could get your experience into Lee's hands so that maybe she could learn from your experience? Well, how do we do that, right? I mean, I guess I could put it out like I am now, and then you guys could email me, and then, a month from now when I catch up with my email, I could look at the email and maybe get this off to her if it's helpful information or whatever. Well, I thought that's not effective. And so it motivated me. Her email motivated me to do something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time, and that is launch the DoughRollers, plural, Facebook page, or I should say Facebook group. And the idea was, a place for us all to have a place to go to ask questions. It really is going to serve as a couple of purposes. One, when a person has a question like Lee does, rather than me being the bottleneck, and in this case, not even knowing the answer, she could post in the Facebook group, and hopefully there'd be folks that have that kind of experience and could help her out. Or maybe just you can point her in the direction of some good articles or resources that can answer her question. That's one thing. The other thing is I come up with articles and resources and things that I think would be useful to you, many of which, for example, I'm going to talk about in today's show. I can just post them right to the Facebook group, and you can get them right away. I mean, I'll probably be doing that throughout the week, not just when I publish a podcast. And other than that, I can just kind of let you know what things are going on. I even thought I should post a picture of my recording studio, such as it is. I could do that in the Facebook group. You get a little insight into what goes on behind the microphone here for those that are interested. So anyway, I'm announcing it today on this podcast. I've not mentioned it in the newsletter. I've not mentioned it on the blog. The DoughRollers, plural, because this is not my Facebook group. Yes, I set it up. I guess I'm the administrator, but I view this as a place for all of us to go to make the most of our money. So DoughRollers, that's you and me. 2 words. So if you're searching Facebook, now I'll warn you right now, I don't even have an image at the top of this thing. I'm looking at it now. It's the blue standard image, I guess, that Facebook puts up there. I'm not sure what you'll see. That's what I see. And it says upload a photo. Well, I don't have a photo with my logo or something snappy to put up there. In fact, if you're anyone out there that's good at graphics and wants to create one for me, that would be great. Shoot it to me in an email. And if I find one that seems to work, I'd be happy to upload it and make that the sort of image for our new Facebook group. But you can go and join. So join. You have to click a button. I guess it all comes to me, and I'll let you into the secret club, DoughRollers, and it'll be a place where we can share information, learn, maybe have some fun, resources, improve our money, that kind of thing. So that's the first thing that I wanted to mention today. The new DoughRollers, it's plural, 2 words. That's what you need to search for. You'll see the DoughRoller. I have a DoughRoller page for the blog. That's different. This is DoughRollers. It's a closed group. You got to click to join. Obviously, I'll let you in, and there you go. Hopefully, it'll be a great resource and place for us to share information. That's the first thing I wanted to mention. The second thing I want to mention is I got another email, and I just today, this morning, and I get this email, this question a lot. And I've mentioned it a few times in the past, and it's this. Someone will email me and say, I want to start a blog. I know you can make money blogging. I know, Rob, you make money blogging. And where do I start? What do I do? So I'm working on an answer to that question. I think at a minimum, what I'm going to do is devote one podcast to 2 things. One, telling you my story. If you've listened to all the podcasts, I've probably talked about it a bit. But I'm going to one place to tell you my story, my experience blogging, and to kind of give you some pointers if you're interested in starting a blog, kind of what you're up against, some tools that make it easy, some suggestions and tips to get your blog up and running, and kind of what you can expect for the first 6 months to a year if that's something you want to do. I'm also thinking about putting together just an email course. I mean, this would be free, but where I don't know, I put together 10 or 20 lessons, if you will, and you get one a day or whatever. I don't know, but I'm definitely going to do a podcast because I've just gotten that question so much. I want to have something where the next time someone emails me and says, maybe that'll be podcast 200. Maybe that's what I should do. It's just my story. This podcast, which started 2 years ago on Veterans Day, and the blogging, I don't know. But in any event, I'll have something I can email folks and say, yeah, listen to this podcast or sign up for this email course, and it'll tell you better or worse everything I know about blogging. But I will tell you, and I'm not overstating it, it has been life-changing for me in so many ways. And I will share that. I'm going to just do it. It'll be number 200. So that'll be just around the corner. I'm now in the groove of one podcast a week. This is 195. So, 5 weeks from now, I'll have that podcast pulled together. The other thing that I want to talk about, again, it's going to be a future podcast, but it's kind of what's going on in my life. I've really stepped up my game in terms of how I manage my business as a business. It's formed as an LLC, and there's reasons for that. There are other options. In 2015, it'll be the first year where it's actually taxed as an S Corp, which means I've got to file a separate tax return, corporate tax return. And I've hired not just a tax preparer, but I've gone to an accountant who has put me on QuickBooks and has access to QuickBooks. And I get emails from his staff questioning my entries. Why did you enter this? What is this for? What's the business purpose of that? And I thought, I really need that. I need someone watching over me. I have never been audited, knock on wood, but if I am, I want to be able to have answers. And I want to be able to show I've documented everything correctly. Part of that is not just using QuickBooks and your corporate form. Part of it also is retirement planning for the self-employed or those that own small businesses. And if you fall into that category, and I know many of you do because you email me, you've probably heard of a SEP IRA, maybe. You maybe have heard of an individual 401k. But then things get a little, out there when you say, well, you can also have a profit sharing component to a 401k. How does that work? Or for some of you, and this I probably be a small percentage, but a defined benefit plan, which I am setting up this year. How does that work? These things, they all have complications. There's always pros and cons. There's no free lunch, right? But in theory, depending on your specific circumstance, you can end up in a situation where you can contribute a significant amount of money pre-tax to retirement accounts. And I'm talking far more than what you can contribute in a SEP IRA even, which I think this year is, $53,000. Of course, far more than a traditional, say, 401k or IRA. I'm working on content on those topics because I think it's important, and it's kind of what I'm going through now. I'm working with a defined a benefit administrator. It's a kind of a whole new world for me. And so I'm going to share that with you for those that'll help. Maybe that's not your situation, but you know someone who's got a small business or is self-employed, maybe it can help them. So that's coming. I'm working on that, and shouldn't be too far away. So what's on tap for today? A number of things, including the question of the week from last week, which you guys just hit that one out of the park, as well as the new question. And in terms of the question of the week from last week, the answers are fairly straightforward. I'm going to cover it at the end of the show, along with how you get the answers. But I'm going to also talk about something that's so important. So I hope you stay through this whole episode, or if nothing else, fast forward to the end, because we're going to be talking about mutual funds with load fees, that 5.75%. And I'm going to tell you why, in some cases, it's an excellent deal. I know I've just stunned everyone that knows I'm a no-fee kind of investor. It's an important topic. We're going to get that when we get to the question of the week from last week, and I'll give you a new question. We did have 4 winners. I mean, a ton of people emailed me. I picked the first 4. I've already sent them the $25 Amazon gift card. So if you didn't hear from me, you weren't one of the first 4. This week, though, I'm going to choose the winner differently. So that's coming. All right. Let's start with, I guess, what I call the main topic of the week, and that is, I was thinking about saving for retirement. We all know the power of compounding. I've talked about it on the show many times. And we know that it's deceiving, that, you see the numbers when you invest whatever, X dollars with an X percent return for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. We see the numbers, we see the math, and still it doesn't quite register. It's like, really? That doesn't seem possible. And so I wanted to look at that issue in a slightly different way. And the point of it is hopefully to encourage you, to motivate you to save more. And so the question I asked myself was, if someone maxed out a retirement account, be it an IRA or a 401k, or maybe even both, their entire careers, how much money would they have? We can think of a 40-year career, but even if just for 10 years, what would you have? Or 20 or 30 or 40, or maybe some of us might work 50 years. If you work 50 years and you maxed out an IRA or a 401k, how much would you have? And to do that, I actually had one of the writers that works with me on DoughRoller. His name is Greg, great guy. I asked him to write this article, so he did. And we talked about the assumptions he was going to make. And they're important. And we made a couple of assumptions, and the goal was to kind of hamstring us, to tie one arm behind our back, so to speak. So here's what we did. We assumed that we'd max out the contributions, but we wouldn't increase those limits year to year because they go up over time with inflation. So we just assumed if it's an IRA, you contribute $5,500 a year over whatever period of time, 10, 20, 40, 50 years. If it's a 401k, it's $18,000. That's the first thing. We didn't increase the contributions by inflation, which over time, that's 50 years from now, assuming we still have a 401k, who knows what the limit will be, 50 grand probably. We didn't increase those contribution limits. We also didn't include the catch-up contributions that you can add on, you can tack on to the IRA or the 401k when you hit 50. We didn't include that. And We even took inflation out of the return numbers. So we assumed a 5% rate of return. The theory was, let's say with a diversified portfolio, maybe, 70% stocks, 30% bonds, or maybe 80-20, you earn 8%. But you got inflation to factor out. It's not 3% right now, but it's much lower. But long term, we'll just use 3%. So we assumed a 5% rate of return. So the point is, we tried to be really conservative. All right, so the question is, let's start with an IRA. If you max out an IRA, $5,500, 5% return for 40 years over, a typical a career span, what do you have? Any thoughts? Any guesses? Well, I'm going to the numbers. They're in an article on DoughRoller that we published this week. After 40 years, you'd have $700,000. $700,000 maxing out an IRA. And again, that's effectively adjusted for inflation and then even reduced more because, again, over 40 years from now, the minimum contribution is going to be a lot higher than $5,500. We've, really sort of been very conservative. You still end up with $700,000. Far more, by the way, than the average person has in retirement, maxing out the IRA. If you wait 50 years, if you work another 10 years, it jumps to 1.2. And that's something to keep in mind with compounding. The out years, the years at the end, have the most bang for your buck, right? Because you've got more money invested at that point. So when you start that compounding, it's compounding on a bigger number. So those out years really have a huge, huge impact. Just to give you an idea, from year 10 to 20, the numbers jump from 72,000 after 10 years to 190,000 after 20, right? So that's a jump of roughly 120 grand. Fast forward to 40 to 50, the numbers we just looked at. And by the way, this is where the video will come in handy because the screencast I'm recording now, I've actually got the numbers up on the screen. But in any event, jumps from 700 roughly to 1.2 million. So it jumps 500,000 in that last decade. Big jump on those out years. So that's the IRA. What about the 401k? Well, of course, the numbers are bigger because you're dealing with a larger contribution. So after 40 years, investing 18 grand a year at 5%, $2.3 million. And again, that's adjusted for inflation, $2.3 million. If you hang on to work in another 10 years and you hit the year 50 mark, $4 million. That's a lot of money. And a lot of money just from a 401k, again, with conservative assumptions. Now, obviously, if you maxed out a 401k and an IRA, you basically add the results together, but you end up with $3 million after 40 years, $5 million after 50. And I guess just for fun, if you're married and you both do that, well, you can double the numbers. And again, the point here was more of just sort of a mental exercise, trying to make the power of compounding more real. Now, I know some of you say, Rob, I can't even max out an IRA, let alone a 401k, let alone both of them. I know. And by the way, I talk to people in that almost every month. I'll meet with someone, have coffee with someone. They're just starting out, whatever. They've got school loans, other things. They're not there yet. That's okay. The key, though, is to make that your goal and to be making progress. When you get a raise, put half of it in the 401k if you can. If you do your monthly bills audit and you shave off $100 in expenses by refinancing some credit card debt, changing your insurance carrier, whatever, don't just let that $100 get lumped into your budget and be spent on who knows what. Increase your 401k or your IRA contributions by that $100. And if they're pre-tax contributions, you could really increase them by about 120 or 125, depending on your tax rate, and still have the same take-home pay. So, the simple things you can do. The thing is, when you do it, it doesn't seem that significant. An extra $100, fine. It goes into the account. It's not like it changes your life. It doesn't immediately. Over 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years, it absolutely is life-changing. So big numbers just from your IRA, just from your 401k. I hope you're taking advantage of those things. By the way, I read a study just yesterday that said women are better at saving for retirement than men. And by better, what they meant was when you look at 401k workplace plans, more women contribute to those plans than do men. I don't know why that is, but pretty interesting. Okay, on to the next thing. So I mentioned this in the newsletter this week. I'm going to drop a link into the Facebook group, which you're all going to join, right? If you don't get the newsletter, DoughRoller.net/newsletter, it goes out every Saturday at 7. It costs $100 a month Just kidding. It's free and worth every penny, I might add. Anyway, so Walmart has this savers catcher thingy. I just ran across this. My wife and I went to Walmart yesterday, and I ended up putting a link to this in the newsletter. Here's how it works as best as I understand it. You go to Walmart, you shop, you get a receipt, you come home. You can put this receipt, it has a unique number, into this tool, or you can scan it if you use the Walmart app, Walmart Savings Catcher. And what it will do is it will analyze the receipt that it just gave you, right? You just got from Walmart, compare the prices, I guess, I don't know how they do it, but to local competitors. And effectively, if there's a difference, if there's a lower price somewhere, give you the difference. I mean, I don't know. It seems pretty simple and like a pretty good deal to me. So I actually used it. I plugged the receipt in. You have to sign in, sign up, give them your name. You got to give them your email address. And I put in the receipt, and it came back and said, okay, we're analyzing your receipt. We'll get back to you in 2 to 3 business days, which kind of surprised me, but I guess they got a lot of numbers to crunch. And I got an email response. They got it. They're validating it, and I'll hear back in 48 hours. So I mentioned that in the newsletter, and immediately I got an email from one of the readers who was great. He said, "Hey, I saw that you mentioned it. I've been using it. I think he got like $20 back. I don't know if it was last month or whatever. Using this free tool at Walmart to try to make sure you get the best prices. So wanted to mention that to you." Again, I've just started using it. Walmart Savings Catcher. You can Google it again. I'll put a link to it in the Facebook group. But it's free money. Might as well take it, right? So I'm just trying it out for the first time. We didn't buy a lot. We spent $40. So how much can I save on a $40 tab? Probably not a lot. But you know what? I'll take it. So that's I thought I'd pass that on to you. And so there you go. All right. Now, another tool I want to mention, one that I came across this past week for those that are either thinking about going to college, maybe you have a son or daughter going to college, niece, nephew, friend, whatever. There was an article about a new tool, I guess, data that the government has put out. And it's called the College Scorecard. Again, I'll put a link in the Facebook group for this, but it's collegescorecard.ed.gov. And the idea is you can search by program or degree, location, size, and of course the name of the school, and it will give you some information about that school, including the cost of the school, its graduation rate, and this was the part I found kind of interesting, the median income for those that have gone to the school and are now out in the workforce. And one of the things that they concluded from this database of information, this was the Wall Street Journal, is that, surprise, surprise, liberal arts degrees and liberal arts schools don't pay as much as schools focused on technical degrees. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Let me do a little search here. So I put in a 4-year degree. I'm actually doing this online as I record this podcast. I have a law degree, but in undergrad I was a liberal arts school and got an English degree in English. So about as liberal arts as it gets. And so when I pull this up, one of the things that I found a little disappointing is that it tells you the salary after attending the school, but it's not by degree. So I'm not getting, how much folks made at these schools with an English degree. Hopefully, I really hope that data becomes more available. But still, it's nevertheless helpful. And it shows you the average annual cost. I'm looking at it now, the graduation rate, the salary after attending, and then you can get more details about each university. Here's the real thing, and what I think is so important is that we think about these things and we help our children think about these issues before they go off to school and before they go off and spend a lot of money. In the article, there were a number of folks, particularly from liberal arts colleges, that thought, this really isn't the right way to look at it. It's not all about the money. Students are not just trying to make more in their working years, but they also want to follow their passions and all that sort of thing. And I thought, well, sure, that's true. I think there's more benefits to an education than just getting a job. But come on, let's get real. I just mentioned a story last week of someone who graduated with a liberal arts degree and they were in debt over $200,000. They must have gone to a fancy pants school, and they have no way of paying that debt off. And so, yeah, follow your passions, but don't follow your passions into a lifetime of debt. That's just stupid. And that I speak from someone who graduated in 1992 from law school with $55,000 in debt. Wasn't debilitating, although in today's dollars, that's probably what, 150? It was a lot of debt. It took me a long time to pay it off, and that was with a law degree, so I was able to pay it off. If I'd tried to get a job with that kind of debt as just an English major, I'd still be paying for it. I don't know how I'd have managed that. So, these are important conversations to be having with those that we love and those that we care about. And it's conversations I've had with our children. What do you want to study? Okay, why? Great. What are you going to do with it? What kind of job are you going to get when you're done? And I get the kind of answer that probably most of you might get. And the answer is, no, I don't know. That's it. I love my children. They're 18. Well, they're a little older than that now. They're still figuring it out. Heck, I'm almost 50 and I'm still trying to figure life out. So, but we still have that conversation, and I'm getting them to think about these things. And, that's important. So thought this would be a good tool to pass along. Again, it's called the College Scorecard. Yes, a link in the new DoughRollers Facebook group. Am I overplaying that one? You should just pause this podcast now if you're not in your car and go join it and then come back. Anyway, that's where the link will be for that. All right, next item. I invest in individual stocks, and it's something that a lot of you email me about, and I don't really talk a lot about it. And maybe that'll change. I don't know. But one of the investments I own is IBM. I bought IBM earlier this year, and Deere and Company. And I bought them both because I think they're undervalued. One, I think they both have good brands. I'm more confident in Deere than IBM, although IBM has a much greater potential than Deere and Company. But I also think they have solid management who are really concerned about how they allocate capital. They both pay dividends. They both buy back shares, which, by the way, isn't always a good thing. A lot of companies buy back shares so that management can increase the value of their options. Those people should be fired in any event. But I think in this case, they're doing smart things with their money. The other thing that IBM is doing in particular is trying to get rid of lines of business that don't have high margins and focus on those lines of business that do have high margins. I think that's very smart. Volkswagen, which we've all heard about their situation, one of the reasons they got in trouble, other than they have immoral management, or apparently, from everything I've read, they basically cheated the system on purpose. That's, I think, pretty immoral. They were going for revenue. They wanted to be the biggest car company in the world. I mean, what a stupid goal. How about the most profitable? Now, that's a goal I can embrace. In any event, IBM is trying to get rid of those low margin businesses. They've gotten rid of a lot of their hardware businesses, and they're trying to focus on where they think the future of computing is heading and high margin businesses. So why am I bringing all of this up? Because this past week, IBM did something that surprised me. They bought the weather company, the Weather Channel, those guys, weather.com. They bought them. Now, they didn't actually buy as I understand it, the channel, the TV channel, but they bought the internet site, all of the data, all of the technology behind it. And it's funny because online people were making fun of this purchase. I was reading an article on Fortune. I'm looking at it now, a bunch of tweets about how apparently the IBM management misunderstood what they meant by the cloud. And so they bought the Weather Channel thinking that's what it meant to take your computing onto the cloud. Anyway, I actually like this purchase. Now, not from the perspective of having analyzed the numbers. They're paying $2 billion. That's with a B, $2 billion. I have no idea if that's a good price or not. I don't know what kind of revenue and profit these assets generate, the cash flow. I have no idea. It's something that I'm going to get as much information on as I can for my own evaluation of IBM. But I like the idea behind the purchase because what they're really buying, they're not buying a website. They're buying, they are, but that's not the focus. The focus is the data that they get. And people, companies, industries pay a lot of money for data about the weather. Now, it's one level for me, it seems a little hard to understand. It's, you get on weather.com or AccuWeather or whatever you use, and all I want to know about is what's the weather going to be like on a Saturday. Companies need a little bit more than that. And in fact, the Weather Channel, the Weather Company, has devices around the world that collect data about the weather in real time, including, I didn't know this, on the wings of commercial airliners. I guess I'm sure they pay a fee for that. And they have them so that jets that are flying overhead, they're collecting data for the weather company, now IBM, across the world real time. I had no idea. IBM thinks this data is very, very valuable. I kind of think it probably is too. Now, whether it's worth $2 billion or not, I don't know. And it's an interesting thing as an investor, because the way I look at that, and I think the way we all should look at that, is that IBM's management is spending $2 billion of our money. That's what they're doing. And that's true, by the way, even if you don't own shares of IBM, because if you're invested in a mutual fund that covers U.S. stocks, I guarantee you own shares of IBM through that mutual fund or ETF. And so IBM's management is saying, hey, Rob, hey, DoughRollers, I'm taking $2 billion of your collective money and all of the shareholders' money, and we're spending it on these assets. And my response to that is, well, you better know what you're doing, and it better be a good choice. And all the other choices you make day in and day out, week in and week out, month in and month out, better be good ones, or we're going to replace you. That's just how it works. Now, it doesn't happen as fast as I'd like in some cases, but that's how it works, and that's how I view it. They're spending our money. Hopefully it's a good purchase. I kind of like it. Just knee-jerk reaction. I'm going to be getting some more information on it as it becomes publicly available. If you're investing in individual stocks, particularly, this is the kind of thing you need to be aware of. You need to be aware of when your companies that you own are making these purchases, and you need to evaluate them. And you might not have all of the data right away. I try to keep as open a mind as I can on these purchases. I try to read articles from folks that I respect who say it's a bad purchase. I try to read articles from folks that say it's a great purchase. A lot of people, they don't know. They're neutral right now. For IBM, a $2 billion purchase, it's hard not to think of that as big, but, $2 billion isn't as much as it used to be. So there you go. That is IBM. Next item. Wanted to mention this. This drives me kind of crazy, and it has to do with labor unions. And labor unions don't drive me crazy. This particular article does. So, I think like everything, there's good and bad. I tend to come from a conservative perspective when it comes to economics. I actually, many conservatives don't like unions. I don't know why that is. I don't know. Employees should have the right to bargain collectively if they want to. It's as simple as that. And if they don't want to bargain collectively, they should be able to say, no, thank you. I don't want to pay union dues. I don't think that's a very good deal. Thanks, but no thanks. And if other employees want to join a union, if it's available where you work, you should be able to. It's as simple as that. And if you strike, I think you should be able to strike. I also, though, by the way, think that the company should be able to replace you. And I'm speaking from someone that worked for a company that had a union. That's just, I think we should be able to make those decisions. I don't want the government ever making those decisions for us. And that came up in the state of Washington. So here's the deal. There's the Service Employees International Union in the state of Washington, right, had pushed and had won a statewide initiative, this was years ago, to organize home healthcare workers that go to the home, and also daycare, childcare workers that go to the home. And he said, well, how do they unionize those individuals? Well, because they get paid by the state through Medicaid and other state-run health benefits and childcare benefits. So in effect, for purposes of the union in the state of Washington, they treated them as if they were state employees. Well, they didn't just give them this opportunity to join the union. They forced them to. You didn't have an option. If you're doing this kind of work, childcare, home health care, you get paid by the state, you're in the union, you pay your union dues, you don't have a choice, you're out of luck. If you don't want to be in a union, too bad. If you like the union, great, but if you don't like it, tough, right? That was the deal. Well, the Supreme Court in 2014, that's the Supreme Court of the United States, not Washington, said, yeah, no. People have a right to associate with whom they want to. You can't force someone to be in this union. If they want to be in it, fine. But if they don't want to be in it, they don't have to be. Well, as you might expect, most of these healthcare and childcare workers had no earthly idea that the Supreme Court ruled the way it did. I mean, who follows the Supreme Court? Frankly, as a lawyer in Washington, I don't follow the Supreme Court. I don't know most of the decisions it renders because, I don't know, most of the time, who cares? So there was a nonprofit that wanted to get the word out in Washington that hey, if you're a home healthcare worker, childcare worker, you can join the union if you want, but hey, the Supreme Court just said you don't have to. So they got from effectively a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act kind of request, the addresses of all these businesses that were doing this work, and they sent them a notice. Hey, the Supreme Court ruled 2014, you don't have to be a part of the union if you don't want to be. And about half the people dropped out. So the participation rate in the union now is less than 50%. All right, fine. Some people like the union, about 50-50. It's a little under 50%. Some people like the union. They pay the dues. They get the benefits. Great. The other 50% or 52% didn't want the union, didn't think it was worth it, whatever. Maybe they thought it was a good deal, but couldn't afford it. I don't know. Whatever. We don't want it. To me, great, perfect. That's America. That's exactly how things should work. Well, the union wasn't happy. And I can understand that. They've just lost 50% of their, or 52% of their union workers. So what did they do about it? Well, if they came to me, of course, why would they? But if they did, I'd say, well, you just got to, it's simple. You're like any other business. You got to make your product more compelling. You've got to do a better job with the collective bargaining process. You've got to get them more pay or more benefits. You've got to make it so that the dues they're paying you are, in return to that, they get valuable service. They get something of value that makes the dues worth it. That's all. You're no different than any other company where you're trying to make the best product you can at a reasonable price. The other thing you might do, I would tell them, is cut your costs. I don't know how lean of an operation you run. Maybe you're paying your union leaders, very competitive, but not but not paying them too much. Maybe you're not. Are your offices too fancy? I don't know. Do you all drive company cars, or do you run a lean operation? And you want to make sure you run a lean operation because you keep your costs down. Maybe you can lower the union dues, and that would get people back. Yeah, that's not what they did. They actually filed a lawsuit because that's what we do here in the United States. And you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to block the state from giving this nonprofit the addresses of the companies that run these, home health care and child care services, so that this nonprofit won't tell all of these employees that they have an option. Are you kidding me? Okay. Next item. Yeah, that just drives me nuts. All right, next item. That's kind of political, except that it affects our daily lives. And that's just one example. My father-in-law, who's retired now, ran a union shop, and it was the electrical contractor in Delaware, a small union. And from everything I've seen about that union, fantastic. Good benefits for the employees, good training, excellent workers. They just, you knew you were getting quality work. I don't know what's going on in the state of Washington in any event. All right. I guess that'll be my foray. By the way, every time I don't know, I don't really consider that issue to be a political one. Some people might. Every time I mention a political issue, though, I get hate mail. I don't know if that's political. I don't think it really is, but now you can post in the Facebook group what an idiot I am. Okay. The next item I want to mention, hopefully this will be useful to some of you or someone you know. So the Obama administration, and by the way, this is not political. The Obama administration, though, is trying to reshape the way colleges and universities are accredited, and I think it's a great move. They're trying to. I don't know how it'll play out, how well they'll execute, but the idea is we want accreditation to factor in jobs that people get. Are they getting good paying jobs after college? Which to me, should factor that in. That seems to be a pretty important criteria. One of the things they're looking at is accreditation, though, for, I'll call them non-traditional learning environments. I just made up that term, non-traditional learning environments, one of which is computer programming boot camps. So the idea is, rather than going to a 4-year degree and getting a degree in computer science or software engineering or whatever, you can go to one of these boot camps, and they usually last. I've looked at a number of them. I've actually thought of going to one. I haven't. I don't know if I would, but I probably not. I don't really want to be a computer programmer, but I enjoy it. In the event, they're like 3 to 4 months, 5 days a week, all day long. I mean, it really is a boot camp, and they're not cheap. I mean, I'd say they cost typically between $10,000 and $15,000. But apparently their employment rate coming out of there for people that want to do full stack development, web development, that kind of thing, which is kind of pretty much where the industry's going. The percentage that get good paying jobs is really high. And so there was an article about this, and maybe figuring out a way to do some accreditation kind of thing for these boot camps, which I think is great. The thing I wanted to mention, though, is a resource. If you're interested in a boot camp, or maybe you know someone that is, maybe they haven't quite figured out what they want to do, and they like to program, but they don't want to go to a 4-year college, you can check out this source, and it's called Course Report, coursereport.com. And again, I'll have a link in the Facebook group, but pretty easy there, coursereport.com. And what it is, it's a website that basically appears to be a database of all of the boot camps that are available by the topic, what you want to learn, and also by location. And I found some in Washington, D.C. that I didn't know existed. And, they're really big in some places where you would expect them to be big, like San Francisco, Austin, Texas, which is a big up-and-coming place for coders. Obviously, New York City. Colorado, oddly enough, big up-and-coming place there, a number of cities there for computer programmers. But they have schools all over the country, and of course they have some that are online. But I wanted to mention that to you. I think it's a great resource if you or someone you know is interested in computer programming. Coursereport.com. All right. Last thing I want to mention before we get to the questions of the week, and the questions of the week, are going to take some time because there's some good things to cover there, is mindware. I'm reading a book called Mindware, and it's funny, as I record this podcast, I realize that it's all the way over on my desk. Hang on. All right. I'm back. Mindware, Tools for Smart Thinking by Richard Nisbett. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I started reading this book this past week. I'm about halfway through. And it's kind of like the book Thinking Fast and Slow, if you've read that one. Behavioral science / mental models, how we should think about issues. The thing I like about Mindware is that it's really focused in large part on finance. And for example, he does a great job of discussing how we get questions wrong that involve sunk costs, right? You've already paid to go to the movies. You bought your ticket ahead of time. But when it comes time to go to the movie, you don't really feel like going. But I got to go anyway. I spent the $12, whatever it was. Well, it's sunk cost. So should the cost you paid influence your decision, say 2 days later, when it's time to go to the movies or the ball game or whatever? Should it affect your decision? I mean, you've spent the money. You can't get it back. It's gone. Doesn't matter whether you go or not. And he has some great analysis and ways to think about that question, as well as lost opportunity costs. And really, the discussion on just those two issues alone are worth the price of this book, and great implications for investing and personal finance in general. So wanted to mention that to you, Mindware, Tools for Smart Thinking. Really enjoying this book. So wanted to mention it to you. Almost finished with it. I tend to read more than one book at a time. I'm also reading, what's it called? The Life-Changing something of Tidying Up. See, all of you probably know what I'm talking about except for me. The Life-Changing Magic. Is that what it is? Yes, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. That's another book I'm reading. I'll mention that one in some detail maybe next week, because that's actually a pretty good book too. But this week, Mindware, Tools for Smart Thinking. Really enjoying that book. Wanted to pass it along for those that might want to check it out. Okay, on to the question of the week. So for those that listened to last week's episode 194, I asked a question at the end of the podcast. I'm going to have another one for you this week, but let's first cover last week's question. And it was simply to research a mutual fund. The ticker was SMCWX. And I wanted to know a couple of things. Obviously, what's the mutual fund? What's its sales charge if it has one? Its expense ratio, what it invests in, stocks or bonds, and where, like how much is U.S. stocks or foreign stocks, and then what its largest holding was. I got a ton of responses. In fact, if you recall, I was going to give a $25 Amazon gift card to the first 4 people that responded with the correct answer. I published this on a Sunday evening. Within 10 minutes, I had more than 4. I don't know, I had 4. It had already been 1 in the first 10 minutes after I published it. Going to do it a little differently this week. We'll get to that in a minute. But the responses were fantastic. Some of you, though, didn't respond. Obviously, the majority of you did. I don't know how many responses I got, maybe 100, I'm guessing. But probably 5,000 people listen to this podcast. So I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. What's wrong with the other 4,900 of you? What's going on? Some of you didn't respond because you're like, I don't want to respond. I get that. That would probably be me, in all honesty. But some of you probably thought, I'm not sure how to do this. I'm not even sure what some of this means. And I'm a little, I don't want to send Rob an email and be wrong. Which, by the way, don't worry about that. I'm wrong far more than I'm right. So there you go. So first of all, let's talk about how we get this information. Then we're going to talk about that sales charge, that load, because I want to give you some new thoughts on that issue, and then we'll wrap it up with the new question for the week. So the first thing you can do with any ticker, particularly for a mutual fund, because they're typically five letters long, is just type it into Google. So if I type in SMCWX, which I just did, I'm pulling up Google. Here we go. There we go. American Funds Small Cap World Fund Class A. Right there in Google, the very first thing that comes up. I see the performance. Right now it's over 3 months. And I get some of the answers that I asked in my question. I've got the name of the fund. That's one thing. It tells me it has a sales charge. It's called a front load, which means you pay for it when you make the investment. There are other classes of shares that can have a load when you sell, depending on when you sell. But this is a front load. It's 5.75%, which is sort of the standard front load. And it's a Class A share. Class A shares have this front load. And what's that mean? It means for every a contribution you make to this mutual fund, they're gonna shave off 5.75%. That's your fee for admission. So you invest $10,000, they're going to take $575, put it in their pocket, invest the difference. That's what the front load means. And I think everyone, at least that responded, got that right. It also, just in Google, haven't done anything else but type in the ticker symbol to Google. It tells me the expense ratio is 1.07%. Another way to say that is 107 basis points, right? Because there's 100 basis points in 1%. So 1.07 would be 107 basis points. If you want to impress your friends at the next party, you can say, yeah, we did some analysis that had 107 bips. And then there you go, bips, short for basis points. That means that whatever you have invested in this fund, they're going to take 1.07% every year for the rest of your life, forever and ever, as long as you're invested in this fund, 1.07%. That doesn't seem like much, does it? Okay. Stocks is mainly a stock fund. You get that from the name of it, but you can't always go by the name. And so how do you get that? When I'm looking at Google, it's not in there. Well, to me, if you listen to the podcast, I love Morningstar. Morningstar, pull it up, put the ticker into the quote box, and I see a lot of the same information I saw on Google. I see the load is 5.75%. By the way, I'm looking at this on my screen. Hopefully when I have the video out, you'll be able to follow along. I see the expense ratio. Sure enough, it's 1.07%. A lot of other information that maybe we'll look at in a future podcast, but I see the performance. If I go far enough down, I see a couple of things that I asked you about. The first thing I see is its top holding. Insight, spelled INCYTE Corp, that represents 1.87% of this fund, which means for every dollar, or every $100, let's say, you invest in this fund, $1.87 goes into Insight Corp. Number two, by the way, is Domino's Pizza. Anyway, so that's that. Now, what about stocks versus bonds? Well, I can see, again, I'm just on this opening page of Morningstar after I put in the ticker. I see its asset allocation. Sure enough, I've got 42.35% in U.S. stocks, 45.82% in non-U.S. stocks, and then roughly 10% in cash and the other category. So again, it's a stock fund, the vast majority in stocks. And there are all the answers to the questions. Now Morningstar gives a ton of information. I've been asked by other listeners to kind of dig into the other information it offers. I'm going to do that. That's on my to-do list. But in terms of sort of the basics, you can quickly get it, right here. And this is all, by the way, I'm not logged in. I have a premium account at Morningstar, but I'm not logged in. So this is all free. There is some premium information you can get, but without even signing up for the free membership. And they have a paid membership that I pay for. But just go onto the site. You can get all this information really, really quickly. So first of all, a big thanks for those that responded. If you didn't, well, hopefully you'll respond to this week's question. But before we get to that, I want to talk about this pesky little load fee of 5.75%. So let me step back for a minute and look at the big picture. When it comes to hiring someone to manage your investments, you basically have two choices. You can go to a salesperson, or you can go to a fiduciary, someone who is a fee-only investment advisor. So what's the difference? A salesperson doesn't sound good, right? Who wants to go to a salesperson? That makes you think of a car dealer. And a fiduciary, someone who by law has to have your best interests at heart. I mean, why would anyone choose a salesperson, right? You would go to the fiduciary. Now, Dave Ramsey, we've talked about his endorsed local providers. Those go to the salespeople, not the fiduciary. Now, I don't know why he chooses that, but I'm going to tell you, in many cases, it's not a bad choice. In many cases, if my only choice was certain fiduciaries, certain fee-only investment advisors versus a Dave Ramsey endorsed local provider who's going to charge me, put me in mutual funds like the American funds that charge 5.75% right off the top, plus expense ratios. This one's 1.07. They're not all that expensive. This one's that expensive, I'm sure, because it's a small cap fund. I would pick Dave Ramsey's endorsed local providers. And I know if you've been listening to this podcast, you think that's crazy. I'm going to tell you why. As part of that, there's a debate going on in Washington right now about whether if someone wants to take their 401k money and roll it over into an IRA and have someone help them invest it, should that person be forced to be a fiduciary? That is, someone who has to take your best interest at heart, right? Now, from a political perspective and from just sort of, sound bites, and you'd say, well, of course, why? Of course you'd hire. Yes, I want a fiduciary. Why would I want a salesperson? Now, in answering that question, though, I'm going to dig a little deeper. First of all, the salesperson has a lot of regulations that govern what they do. They can't just, steal your money. Well, they could, but that would be a crime. But seriously, they have certain standards that they must meet. But fiduciary is not one of them. Their standard is different. They have to invest for you in investments that are suitable. And I'm putting the air quotes as I say that, suitable. That's a whole legal definition. What does suitable mean? It gets litigated all the time. Investors feel like they get ripped off. They go to arbitration against their salesperson broker, usually in an arbitration proceeding run by FINRA. I have good friends that work at FINRA. And the whole debate is whether that investment was suitable for me. But that's the standard for the salesperson, broker, people. Is the investment suitable? For the investment advisor, fee only, they're a fiduciary. They have to have your best interests at heart. Now, all right, that's fine, Rob. You're saying, I know what you're thinking. So what? Okay, suitable, but why would I want suitable? Why isn't fiduciary better? Well, let me first tell you what the problem with suitable. It's actually not American funds with their 5.75% load. And again, in this case, it's 107 bips. For their bigger funds, large cap stuff, it's usually 60 to 70 bips. That's actually not the real problem with the suitable folks, I'll call them, versus the fiduciary folks. Again, we're not talking about do-it-yourself investors where there's no fees. We're talking about suitable versus fiduciary. The big problem with the suitable folks is that they'll put you in things besides American funds. They'll put you in non-traded REITs. They'll put you in exotic insurance products that 99.9% of people do not need. Those products are never bought. They're always sold, and they line the pockets of salespeople. That's what they do. I hope you sense a little anger in my voice because it just really ticks me off. I talk to people, I've got a non-traded REIT. And I think they don't have a clue, by the way, that when they invested $500,000 in that non-traded REIT, they have no clue how much their salesperson made. 5 figures, huge commissions off those non-traded REITs, huge commissions off of these ridiculous insurance products. Just get term life insurance and invest the money in any event. That's the big problem with the world of brokers and salespeople that get you to take your money out of a 401k. It really burns me up when they convince people to take money out of the thrift savings plan, probably the best investment vehicle available anywhere, certainly the cheapest, to put it in expensive, ridiculous investments like that. That's the biggest problem with that side of the world. And if making them become fiduciaries to handle someone's 401k rollover gets rid of that, then I'm all in, because that's just absurd. All right, let's put that aside. Let's talk about American funds and the 5.75 load. By the way, American funds isn't the only one that charges the front load. I just use them as an example. Versus the fiduciary, this person that has your best interests at heart. Which one is better? Well, I put together a spreadsheet and I made some assumptions. I said, okay, we're going to invest for 40 years. We're going to invest $10,000 a year. We're going to earn 8%. We're going to forget taxes because for the comparison purposes, it doesn't matter. And I thought, okay, what if there's no fee at all? right? You're not going with the suitable crowd. You're not going with the fiduciary crowd. You're going with the DoughRollers crowd. You're investing on your own. All right. So the 8% return after 40 years, 10 grand, you have $5.6 million. 5 point. Let me try that again. 2.6 million. 2,590,000. That's what you have after 40 years, right? Now, what do you think you have if you simply add the 5.75% load fee, which effectively means that instead of investing $10,000 a year, you're investing, hope I get this math right, $9,425 because they take the 5.75% off. So you're investing a little less, but you're still getting the same 8% return. What do you have? Well, it doesn't drop as much as you might think. It goes from roughly 2.6 million to 2.44. Now, don't get me wrong. I'd much rather have that 160,000 in my pocket than someone else's. But I don't think it's quite that dramatic. Now, some of you are saying, "No, Rob, that's not a fair comparison because these American funds, just like the small cap that we've been looking at, charges higher expense ratios." So in your little comparison there, you assumed an 8% return for both. But is that a fair comparison? Well, we could debate that all day long. Let's use a lower return rate then for this front load fee. Let's assume because of the higher expense ratios. Remember, the 5.75 is just the sales charge. You still got to look at the expense ratios. And they're higher on these. These are actively managed funds. These aren't Vanguard or Fidelity index funds. So let's assume a 7.5% return and assume the 5.75% load fee. What's that do to our bottom line after 40 years? Well, remember, the first one with no fees is 2.6. With just the load fee, it goes down to 2.44. If we reduce the assumed return by 0.5%, it takes it further down to 2.14. So, okay, a big difference. What's interesting, by the way, is that losing that 0.5% in your return each year has a bigger impact than the 5.75% load fee. Remember, that load fee is a one-time fee when you invest, right? The expense ratio, and we haven't gotten to it yet, but our fiduciaries, the ones that have our best interests at heart, those are fees that hit us every single year until we're dead, right? Okay. Yeah, this gets me angry too. This advisory fee is what I call it. This is for those, hey, fee only. We don't get paid by those big bad mutual fund companies that charge a load fee. We're fee only. We're neutral. We don't care what you invest in. We're going to put you in what we think is best for you. Now, what if they charged 1.5%? And you may be saying, well, wait a minute, Rob, that's crazy. No, it's not crazy. In fact, very well-known names charge more than that. I know good people that charge 1.5%, and I like them. I don't really say anything to them, but I think they're ripping their clients off. There's absolutely no excuse to take someone's money, put it in mutual funds, and charge them 1.5% for doing so. That's absurd. Okay, I know you want the number. $10,000 a year for 40 years. We're going to just assume the 8% return, but we're going to shave off 1.5% that goes to the investment advisor. So we don't have the 2.6 million that the no fee gets us. We don't have the 2.44 that just the load fee would take us down to. We don't get 2.14 for the load fee and the reduced return because of the expense ratio. You know what we end up with? It's not even 2 million. 1.75 million. 1.75 million from the people that's supposed to have our best interests at heart. Oh, okay. I'll calm down. I think this debate between fiduciary and not a fiduciary, fiduciary and a salesperson is important at one level, but largely it misses the point. Don't be taken in by someone who tells you they are a fee-only advisor. That by itself is, I wouldn't say it's meaningless. It's 1/10 of the story. You got to understand, what are you charging me? Why are you charging me 1.5%? Why are you charging me 2%? In my mind, 1% is the absolute ceiling. And even then, I'm asking a lot of questions. Why that much? And you might say, well, what are the options? And you've heard me talk about Vanguard, 30 basis points for their investment advisory fees. But you might be saying, well, yeah, I've heard Vanguard, Rob. I know you like Vanguard, but whatever. I'm not sure I want to put my money with Vanguard. Do you have, a list of places where I can invest my money, with real people that will help me, that don't charge me 1.5 or 2%, don't even charge me 1%. I do. I found a great article that lists a whole bunch of them. And you know what I'm going to do with that link, don't you? That's right. It's going to be in the Facebook group, and you'll see it there when you go and join later today. So this whole debate of load fee versus, not having a load fee, I'll tell you this, yearly fees that hit your account year after year after year are by far the most deadly. And when you're paying an investment advisor, I chose 1.5% in my example. It's just crushing you. I would invest with an endorsed local provider in a heartbeat over paying someone 1.5%. Now, for full disclosure, I don't invest with either because to me, no fee is much better than load fee. So I do it all on my own. Maybe that's not you. Now, again, that doesn't mean you go for a salesperson. There are investment advisors that charge an annual fee that, charge reasonable prices. Again, I'll have that list for you. It's a link to an article from a very reputable source, and it's in the Facebook group. Okay. Pardon me while I take a sip of coffee. We are now on to the question of this week. Now, I'm going to do this a little differently. This is a really important question, and I really hope you all answer it, particularly for some of you are going to know the answer immediately. You're going to go to you're going to go get the answer, email me, you'll have it right away. Some of you are going to roll your eyes and oh, I've got to do work to answer this. Please do it. Please. This is so important. It dovetails with the discussion we just had. And here's the deal. I'm not going to pick the first 4 this time. It's November, what day is it today? November 8th, Sunday. I'm going to let this go all the way through to Friday of this week. And I'll collect all the emails through Friday night at midnight, and then I'll randomly pick 4. Now remember, if you've already won, if you were one of the lucky 4 that won last time, I'm going to exclude you just to give other people a chance to win, at least just for this month. But so don't worry about getting this in right away. Just get it in by Friday. And here's the question: what is your weighted average expense ratio? What are you paying for your investments? And I want to know if you're paying someone to invest for you, include their fee. And some of you, I guarantee you, some of you are listening. You say, Rob, I do have someone invest for me. It's a family person. My parents used them, and I don't know what the fee is. Call them up and ask them. Look at your statement and see if it's on there. I want you to calculate the expense ratio, the weighted average expense ratio of all of your mutual funds and ETFs. And by the way, if you own individual stocks, include those too. The expense ratio will be 0, but that brings down your weighted average. I have individual stocks. It's why my weighted average expense ratio is about 9 bips. That's it. Those individual stocks help. So I want to know your weighted average expense ratio. And then if you're paying someone to invest for you, what their fee is. And really what I want is for you to know it. That's what I really want. So by the way, if you don't feel comfortable, I don't know why you'd care, but if you don't feel comfortable actually giving me the numbers, it's okay. Just email me and say, Rob, I got the calculation. I know what it is. Count me into put me in the drawing for the Amazon gift cards. This is so important. It has such a huge impact on your life and your family's life and maybe your children's life. It's huge. And you need to know what that number is. And I talk to so many people who don't. So I want you to calculate it. Now, how do you do it? Well, you can do it by hand. You can just, you take every investment you have, how much you have in each investment and the expense ratio, and just do a weighted average. So what you would do for each investment is take how much you have in that investment, divide that number by your total money invested across all your accounts, retirement, non-retirement, everything, and then multiply it by the expense ratio of that investment. You get a result. Do that for every single one. Add up the results. You got your weighted average. Pretty simple. Now, there are a couple of ways you can make it a little easier. You could use personal capital. You link all your accounts and it tells you what your expense ratio is. Pretty simple. That's the easy way. And you can do that. You can check them out at DoughRoller.net/PC. That is an affiliate link, meaning if you sign up, I get a small fee. I always disclose that. DoughRoller.net/PC. But you don't have to use that. Again, you can do it by hand, or you can do it with that spreadsheet that Dan, a listener, prepared for me. I modified it a little bit, have some more modifications to it that I'll share with you in the coming weeks that I plan. But that was in podcast 179. So if you go to DoughRoller.net/podcast 179, and I am quickly going to that now to make sure that link works. Podcast 179. It's a Google sheet, so it's free. Yep, that's it. It'll redirect you to the article. When you go to the spreadsheet, make a copy of the spreadsheet so you can save it in your own Google account. Then you can make changes to it. You input all your investments, and it includes a calculation of your weighted average expense ratio. So plenty of ways to do this, but it's really, really important. So do it this week. Email me, and maybe a $25 Amazon gift card's coming your way. Again, I'm going to just select the winners randomly. That way, you guys have time to figure this out, because it's really, really super important. Well, there you go. That's the show for today. Hey, hope you're having a great week. Hope you have a great week ahead. Looking forward to you all joining the Facebook group, and you'll have that link to that article that I told you about, as well as all the other resources I mentioned in today's show. And please calculate your expenses for your investments, your average expense ratio, what you're paying an advisor if you are. And, the point of all that too is not that you shouldn't have an advisor. It's just that you should pay a fair price. And the first step is knowing what you're paying. So figure that out. Shoot me an email, dr@DoughRoller.net, and I'll select the winners next Saturday morning and email the 4 winners, as well as have some follow-up in next week's podcast. Until then, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.